The natural world is full of phenomena that is incomprehensible to our minds. One such case is the annual migration of birds like the Amur Falcon, a relatively small raptor. What else does this falcon have in common with the passenger pigeons, another bird that went extinct more than 100 years back? Could this Amur falcon, which is classified as least concern by IUCN, still face dangerous threats to its existence? Can a region that is notorious for its hunting culture, a region that harvested more than 1.2 lakh individuals in the year 2012, can this same region turn protectors of the Amur falcon from 2013 onwards? Let us hear this amazing tale of conservation with the participation of locals from Dr. Suresh Kumar of Wildlife Institute of India.
Good morning to you, Subodh and Seema. Thanks for inviting me once again for giving a presentation on my Amur work. So as you know, I work for the Department of Endangered Species Management at the Wildlife Institute of India. And this is a story that started off way back in 2013 and has been one of the very exciting, no doubt, but also a very satisfying project to do. That is, within the project tenure, you're able to see, changes or able to manage challenges that very often we face when it comes to conservation of a particular species. So it's quite an exciting story, and I'm sure this will definitely influence or get to the interest of a lot of people who are listening to this presentation. So birds. Birds are incredible, they're amazing. And amongst birds, there are some birds which are charismatic, okay, like raptors. Raptors are truly charismatic. So I'm starting off this presentation with a sketch of birds migrating across the North American plains. This is the story of the famous passenger pigeons that used to migrate across the North American landscape in such numbers, such incredible numbers, that people kept shooting them without even taking any aim. It was also reported that, or stated that when these birds used to fly across, they used to completely cover the sky. Okay, so it was like one dark cloud passing through. And this used to go on for hours. So the idea, the point that I'm trying to raise here is that birds, some of these birds do fly in very large flocks. And it's part of their migration, it's part of their life cycle. So their breeding range is in some area, and their non-breeding range or wintering range is somewhere else. So even if the breeding range and non-breeding range are well protected, but the intervening areas through which they pass also becomes equally important. And when we talk about the passenger pigeon, at that point of time, people kept shooting them. There was no technology at that time to know where they are going and where they are coming from. People kept thinking that they're all just flying over the Pacific Ocean and they're all dying. So why should this get wasted away? Rather, we could eat it. So they were just shooting so many of them, and that there were so many birds to eat. There were train loads of these birds taken out from wherever they were being shot. And they were actually fed to pigs. Scale of numbers of these passenger pigeons. So unimaginable numbers. So no one actually thought that this particular species occurring in such large numbers could go extinct. So this is the passenger pigeon. And as you know today, from nearly 1 billion birds, 1 billion to close to 4 billion of these pigeons, generally people thought that this will never go extinct. It just, they were reduced to a single female way back in 1914. This was the last of the bird that was in the Cincinnati Zoo. It was famously known as Martha, and it was waiting for a mate. They were searching the American landscape for a partner for this bird so that they could bring back this particular species. But you know that in 1914 she died. So this definitely just did not die down. This actually created a huge conservation drive throughout America, and then it actually it started off as a movement across the world. So passenger pigeons, no doubt, uh, are attributed to this starting of this conservation movement for protection of species, all sorts of species. So around 2014, it marked the 100th anniversary of the passenger pigeons. Okay, while the world was all busy trying to organize programs to commemorate the event, and that there are many more such species that are on the verge of extinction, and that something needs to be done to get more and more people involved in conservation movement. A lot of these programs were happening just around the same time. I would say a very similar sized bird was being harvested in large numbers in a remote corner of India. So most of us woke up to the stark images, very hard hitting images of large number of these birds being collected or harvested. So there were reports about 120,000 to 150,000 birds estimated to be hunted by local people during their annual migration or during that particular year. Okay, so what was this bird? So this story goes back to October, November 2012, and it is associated with this Amur Falcon. And that's my story for today. Okay. In fact, when we woke up to this mass scale hunting of these birds, that's when everybody also started to think about Amur Falcon. Not many of us have actually heard of the Amur Falcon. In fact, not even many have actually seen this bird. I'm talking about bird watchers and bird photographers. And where exactly was this happening? So this was happening in a remote area in Nagaland. And there were a lot of media outcry. There was a lot of newspaper reports about this. A lot of people wrote about this. And everything that was written about was nothing but massacre. Okay, so a National Geographic reporter did cover the story, stating that this is not something that's acceptable. This is nothing but simply massacre of these Amur falcons, and that they are long-distance migratory birds. They do not belong to any one country. They belong to they are global citizens. They don't need visas. They don't need passports. So they need to travel free, which they do. So this was not something that just rubbed off or pushed aside. And as most people stated, that we need a much larger solution to this. We need to stop this. This simply cannot go on. So 2012 was a black in the Nagaland's calendar, okay, of events. This was something that caught up everyone, and the MOEF, the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, was sounded about it, and some action had to be taken immediately. So where was all this happening? This was happening in a very remote area in Nagaland, in a reservoir. Here I've marked it in a red star. It's known as the Young Reservoir. Let me tell you that this reservoir, it's a hydroelectric project, came up in 2000. So the Amurs were coming to this landscape even before. But in 2012, I was told that these birds came in very large numbers to this particular reservoir. So local people actually took opportunity, seeing these really large numbers. So the fishermen who are fishing in this reservoir, they resorted to putting up the same fishing nets up in the sky. So instead of catching fish, they were actually catching Amurs. So people were always shooting and killing, wildlife in these areas, and it's part of their culture. The hunting has been a part and parcel of many of the northeastern states, and which is something that we are still dealing with. We are trying to convince people to stop hunting and start bringing in some control measures. So, so many Amur falcons were caught in 2012 that people were having that many that it was more than enough for them to eat. So they started to take it to the local markets to sell it. And that's when the commercial scale trade started. And that is something against the law. Okay, as long as it's for sustenance, a few birds, it's fine. You're talking about millions of Amurs, as we know now. but not something of this sort. So this also woke us all up about the geography of Nagaland. Everybody knew Nagaland, and everybody also had the stereotypical thought that anything and everything that moves in Nagaland is eaten up. Okay, that's not necessarily true. There are areas which are very well protected for decades now, and there's quite a good amount of bird life, wildlife there. But when you look at the majority, when you look at the entire Nagascape or that adjoining landscapes, yes, the habitats, the forests, and the birds and the wildlife are all disappearing. So something really needed to be done. And in a situation like this, going into Nagaland and trying to resolve this issue or try and control this issue was a huge, huge challenge. Okay? It was because of the Amurs I happened to go to Nagaland. So during my first visit, I went to this reservoir. What a scenic landscape. There are such landscapes all across Nagaland, and somewhere in one of these landscapes, right down here in this forest patch here, overlooking the reservoir, the Amurs were roosting in very, very large numbers. So the fishermen didn't have to take so much pain. If they were fishing around here, they could just move and set up the nets right over there. And the birds, when they arrive in the evening to roost, they would just get caught in all of the nets that's put up there. So it was an unimaginable number, unacceptable number of birds that were being shot. Let me also tell you, before we go into the story of, so as most of the audience out there listening to this story, you're all aware that India is one of the important destinations, wintering destinations for a huge number of birds arriving from the northern latitudes, primarily the Russian Arctic, and then all the way from Mongolia and Kazakhstan and all of these landscapes. They all come down into winter, down into the Indian subcontinent. So all of these areas, actually, all of these birds are part of the Central Asian Flyway. So when we talk about the Central Asian Flyway, most of the birds migrate through the west. This is where we have much of the information. There's a lot of bringing programs suggesting that this is the passage through which a lot of these birds come in. They're primarily because they're avoiding the high Tibetan plateau and the high Himalayan ranges. So the other corridor through which birds do enter is through the Eastern Himalayas or through the eastern northeastern hill states. So this is a corridor, or this is through a flyway or a passage that very little researched, or we have very little information about what are the birds coming in and which are those species and all of those stories. So, the Amurs represent one such species. The Central Asian Flyway, adjoining to the Central Asian Flyway, is the East Asian Australasian Flyway. So the Amurs actually cut across all flyways. So they in fact connect landscapes and they're connecting flyways. So they actually breed in part of the Central Asian and more to the East Asian Australasian Flyway in the Amur region, a map. I will show you that a little later again. They move down into the Central Asian Flyway and they are passage migrants to India. And from here on, they go into Africa. So they become part of the African Eurasian Flyway. Species in this whole episode happened, and everybody's curious to know what is this Amur and all this stuff. And in all my years of trekking around in Nagaland, in Arunachal, to my visit to Nagaland, I had been seeing. I never bothered to actually see or look for these birds because I knew they were passage migrants. I've only seen during a short window of time. Well, coming to the Amurs, the literature states that these birds are their numbers, their population, the assessment that has been done is something like more than 1 million individuals are probably out there in the wild. So this is a species that is currently assessed as least concern. It is not anywhere in the high priority conservation priority today. Because of the sheer numbers that they occur in, and also the range that they occur in. So it's quite a species that's quite common in their respective areas. So not in the priority list. And like I told you again, these birds breed in the Amur region. This is the Amur region that you will notice here, and in yellow, and they pass through India. And then they go down to Southern Africa or South Africa where they winter. This is their wintering destination. Now, what is so unique about the Amurs is also that these birds are trans-equatorial migrants. All of the migrants that come down into India, many of them, they winter in India, which is above the equator. And as the spring sets in, these birds return back to their respective breeding grounds. But here is a case which comes down to India on passage, down to Africa, and to go almost all the way down to 30-degree latitude. So almost 45-degree northern latitude to 35-degree southern latitude. So it's extremely interesting. Why would this bird do that? Why would this bird not stop in India? Why would this bird not winter in India? What is so unique there in South Africa or Southern Africa? Okay, so now we know that there are quite a few species that are really smart. Okay, so they have some other strategy that they are adopting to, which is why they're doing this trans-equatorial migration. So there is also one another interesting aspect of this, which was mentioned in literature before we actually started our study, which is that they also do what is known as an elliptical migration, which is they go down from India in a particular direction to Africa, and then they return back in another direction. Okay, so again, when I say this, it's interesting. Why are these birds doing that? Why don't they come back on the same route? Why should they actually explore a new track or a new path? What is it that is governing them, their decision process as to why they should fly in these directions at different times of the year? So a lot of these very unique, peculiar behavior of this bird that has kept us thinking. And of course, I'll be also telling you there are a lot of questions. So whether the Amurs were being harvested prior to 2012, yes, they were. If you look into literature, even Salim Ali states this, that in the Kachar Hill districts in the northeast part of Assam, these birds were harvested during the season. And there is also mentioned that during October, November, 50,000 plus birds do arrive and remain for 3 to 4 weeks to feed and rest, and then they disappear. It's interesting what happens to these Amurs. Where do they go back? Do they come back again into India, or do they migrate across Pakistan and then entering into the Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and go back into the Amur region? So, it appeared like they're avoiding the Tibetan Plateau. Okay. Actually, these are very high elevation, high altitude areas, very low in oxygen and all that. So it's difficult. But this is the broad background, the information that we had. So before starting off our study, we also looked up at records to understand where all they are being reported from. So naturally, before 2012, there were probably very few people seeing this, and at the same time, people were not reporting that many sightings. So thanks to eBird now, there's a lot of people sighting these birds and putting it on eBird. So from whatever limited data information that was available, all these red spots indicate that there's a lot of clustering in the Western Ghats. And if you notice here, Northern Western Ghats, that's parts of Maharashtra. Okay, that's very interesting. So all of these spots predominantly are of the time between October to November. So these birds were definitely arriving into the Indian landscape, and probably from here on, they were taking the oceanic route. So that's quite interesting in the sense that why would the Amurs would attempt something like this? Why wouldn't they not take a land route along the Pakistan region and then go into Arabian Peninsula and thereafter into Africa, if Africa is their end destination? So why is it that they're adopting a strategy of this, or is it they're doing this at all? And why over here in the coast and not maybe further south here? Then you also notice there are these red spots over Andamans and Sri Lanka, and there are also reports from Maldives and a small speck of island in the Indian Ocean known as the British Indian Ocean Territory. So Amurs are being spotted even here. Are these birds making a much longer oceanic crossing all the way from Southeast Asia into the Indian Ocean and then across into the African continent? So if they were doing that, that's just incredible length of journey of ocean that they would be doing. So it's quite exciting. There are a number of birds again coming in from Gujarat, a number of reports, and all of this pertains to April and May. This is the time when they are being sighted. Not many records during the October, November. So that elliptical migration that I was talking about, this could be the entry again. And there are not many other records in India. So one, people are not able to see them that often. The other, stop anywhere in India. So that could be the reason. Moving on to our presentation. So they were definitely coming in from the northern latitudes. At that point of time, we thought they could even just cross the Himalayas. What's the for a bird which is flying so far and wide may not be a problem. So we just generally thought that they could be coming in this direction, going down to the Western Ghats and cutting across straight from here straight to South Africa. When I was talking to you about this mass scale hunting that was happening in Nagaland, and that too pertaining to a migratory species, now this became even more a serious issue because India is a signatory to the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Okay, this is under the United Nations Environment Program, and this particular program, or the CMS, there are countries that sign up for this, and it is basically becomes the responsibility of the signatory country to provide safe passage or provide protection to all migratory species, given that they do not belong to any one particular country. So being a signatory state and witnessing this large-scale harvest of Amur Falcons did not go really well. So the CMS actually wrote to the Indian government, to the Indian ministry, asking for the government to take up some immediate actions to ensure that these birds are given protection and this does not repeat again. So it was a lot of pressure at that point of time that we had to do something about this. And so it was again a major challenge. So when the large-scale harvest happened and was brought to light, immediately naturally the Nagaland State Forest Department started out to try and bring in some kind of regulation, try to impose certain things like stop hunting and taking away the guns and all of these things. But I would like the audience to understand this here, that Nagaland is very different in terms of its governance. Only 0.5% of the geographical area of Nagaland state is under the control of the Forest Department. The rest of the area is all community governed. The communities decide what they will do with the forest in that area, what they will, also they have their own regulations about hunting and harvest and all of these things. So we were actually facing a major challenge in actually trying to impose this. The communities would just simply say, it's none of your business, you guys, it's our way of life, we will do what we want. Okay, I'm not saying that they said that, but I'm saying that they could say this, so this was quite a challenge. And so thankfully, a lot of civil society organizations, a lot of NGOs, BNHs, and there's this NGO there in Nagaland known as the Nagaland Wildlife and Biodiversity Conservation Trust. So some notable people from these groups actually spend a lot of time trying to convince people, create awareness among the people about how unique these birds are. And thankfully, they started receiving this. So they became receptive. Prior to this, nobody had gone into these places to talk to them about conservation. So a lot of things were happening at that time. And it did create awareness amongst the people and gradually gained the support of the local people to not hunt birds when the birds arrived. So in 2012, in that 2-week window, whatever happened, and the birds are gone. So it was now a challenge to ensure that when the birds again arrived back in October, at that time, there is this kind of hunting does not repeat. So 2013, we are waiting for it to arrive. While that was happening, there is this person standing in the front row in a church. He's an officer from the Nagaland State Forest Department. And he's a Maharashtrian, and he belongs to the Nagaland cadre. He's an IFS officer, and he was given charge of managing this particular issue. He had just finished his diploma in wildlife management at the Wildlife Institute, and we were actually talking about it. That his name is Hemant Kandi, and we were talking about it as to how once he gets back, he should try and take up this issue. So as soon as he got back after his diploma, his boss, the PCCF and Chief Wildlife Warden at that time, told him, "You now come back with the training, go straight down to Doyang or Panti area and try and manage this issue. You learnings, you please put it to use." So he was teamed up with another of his colleague, a lady officer, Nagaland State Forest Department, an IFS officer again, and she actually belonged to this particular community. So both of them were teamed up, and they were taking up this conservation awareness program in Nagaland. And so what they did, they started talking to people at first, trying to talk about how important these birds are and that they are our guests. And at the same time, they thought that why don't we speak to the pastor? Because in Nagaland, majority of, predominantly, it's of the Christian faith, and Sunday, it's a must for everybody to visit the church. So that's the time when you can actually meet up with the entire village. So instead of going door to door, house to house, you can actually meet up with everybody and talk to them there. So this was something, a very smart move. And they actually spoke with the pastor and got the pastor interested into conservation. So after every Sunday prayer, after the mass, the pastor actually preached the community about conservation. So you please understand all this. This was all happening for the first time in Nagaland. Nothing like this had happened before. So getting the religious institutions involved in conservation was another major step. And the church is very, very powerful, like many of the religious institutions across India. They're quite powerful. People do have faith in these systems. And they started actually respecting this. And what I'm trying to say is they set a promise that when the birds do arrive back here in Nagaland, they would not, or in this particular village in Doyang, the village known as Panti, they would not hunt these birds when they come. They would respect that. So there was a lot of wildlife documentaries that were shown to them. Now, they do get to see television, Animal Planet, Discovery. They've been seeing all this, but guiding them through these documentaries, telling them about these animals, telling them facts like the way I'm telling you about the story about the Amurs. So this brings in the thought process. It starts people to wonder. So that's not just a visual that's passing through your mind and you saw it and you went away. So telling them the stories became very important. So a lot of groundwork was already set. And when I did arrive in Nagaland, there was a project that we were conceiving, that how to actually relate people to these birds. Okay, I will tell you about the project. And the project was about understanding where these birds are coming from. How would you convey to the people about where these birds are coming from, even when you yourself don't know where they're coming from? It's very easy to go and tell the people that they're coming from Siberia. But where is Siberia? How are you going to connect the geography to them? For a local hunter, for a local man from this village or from any other remote part of Nagaland, for him, his life revolves around within his valley or within the hilly areas of his village. Anything beyond this ridge, he wouldn't know. And no doubt, they always knew that these birds arrive here during a certain time of the year. So they knew they're probably coming from very far. They knew that. But from where exactly? So how will you talk about conservation, or how would you take these, associate them with this bird without understanding giving them the geography? Where is Siberia? Where is Russia? Where is China? And all of these stories. So this is when this groundwork was happening, we were envisaging, we were visualizing that we need to understand this. So there was also this push from the ministry that something needs to be done. And one of the important things that needed to be done was also understanding where else are these birds stopping over. Now, is hunting happening only in this place, or is it happening elsewhere? Hunting could be happening anywhere. And these are all remote mountainous tracts that we're talking about, not necessarily in Nagaland. It could be even in the adjoining areas of Arunachal, could be even in Myanmar, it could be even in Manipur, Mizoram, any of these places. So where we know that there has always been hunting, which is part of the tradition. So understanding these stopover sites is very important. Now, all of this is only possible not just by taking a motorcycle or a car and driving around everywhere. It's not possible. You need to do something more smarter, or something using technologies. So I'm coming to that story. That's where this whole story is. But 4th of November 2013, that was the first day of mine in this Doyang Reservoir, and I was waiting for these birds to arrive. The birds were not there. The birds arrived to roost only late in the evening after twilight. Okay, almost after after dusk. Not twilight, early in the morning. So after dusk, around 4:30, 4:50, you're talking about November. The sun sets much earlier there in the northeast, and it gets dark. And these birds arrive, and I and a few colleagues from the CMS and some Hungarian technical partners with me, we were standing there. We were waiting, and we were actually asking Hemant, "Hey, Hemant, where are these birds? I mean, are there really that many number of birds that will come to this particular site?" He said, "Sir, just wait, the birds will come. And when they come, it will be like a river that will flow, non-stop river flowing." Okay, so that's the number. So we kept waiting. Finally, a few birds arrived. And when these birds did arrive, we thought that, okay, let's start making a count of how many birds are here. So we started counting the number of birds. And when the birds actually started arriving, it was nothing but, it was just a deluge. It was just so many birds, we stopped counting. We just wanted to enjoy the moment. We just wanted to watch these birds. It's something phenomenal, unbelievable that was going on in this place. We couldn't believe that there is a raptor, an insectivorous raptor that predominantly feeds on insects or smaller prey, that can occur in such large numbers. It was nothing short of a swarm. Every dot in this image here you see is Amur Falcon. And I've only been able to, or my friend capture only as part of the image, 360-degree view is just Amurs. So incredible number of birds. But at that time, we were also shocked. Now, where on earth are we going to be able to catch these birds? Okay, so I'm going to come to that story, but you have to catch a few birds out of these million birds. It's easy, but there are problems with it, which I will tell you. So today we know Nagaland is the falcon capital of the world. Okay, we know now that there is nowhere else in the world, or possibly only Nagaland, where these birds gather or congregate in such large congregations. Why? Why is it that in Nagaland that they're gathering in such large numbers? And now we know that anywhere in the breeding area, which is far and wide, very large tract of land, even in the non-breeding area, you would never see Amurs gathering in such large numbers. In South Africa, there are a few roost sites where the largest roost site would sport probably about host something like 30,000 or maybe 25, 30,000 of these birds. Nowhere near to the spectacle that you see here in Nagaland. And I will also tell you that over time we have identified many more sites. And it's not just in one site that you have this kind of congregation. You have parallelly all of those other sites where you have large gatherings or large congregations of these birds. So you're dealing with an incredible number of Amur Falcons that is there. So it's not 50,000 plus, it's probably a million Amur Falcons all funneling into Nagaland. So the question still remains, why? Why Nagaland? Okay. So like what the people had promised in 2012 and thereon subsequently during the conservation awareness programs, that they would not hunt these birds. So true to their words, when the birds did arrive, we were witness, I was witness to the fact that nobody resorted to hunting these birds. So it was zero hunting, completely zero hunting. And as I'm speaking to you now, it's 2020. All through these years, there has never been an episode of what we saw in 2012. So this is by far one of the most successful conservation stories in the world. I don't have any hesitation in saying this. This is unimaginable. And believe me, as I say this, the same state where everybody says everything is cooked up and eaten up, everything that moves is eaten up, the same state, they have actually shown that, no, it's not true. We can also be protectors. So zero hunting, and the same reporters, the National Geographic reporter here writing Safe Passage for Amur Falcons through India. He wrote about the massacre and he is writing about. So it's an incredible story of how within 1 year, everything has changed. You know, it's quite dramatic. Even sometimes we used to wonder, this is really happening? Yes, it does happen and it is happening. So it's a very, very good story, a good story at a time when we often hear primarily depressing stories or sad stories and bad stories. So anyway, so this is the story. So let me move on to the project and the story about the Amurs. I would like to call this flight for freedom. So since 2012, these birds have been flying free. Okay, many of us as youngsters, as a kid, I watched this movie Born Free about those lioness that were raised and released back in the African savanna in those areas. Born free, we all feel free. Every bird watcher, when they look at birds, they feel that sense of freedom. Okay, so that's what is fascinating about this. We've always dreamed of flying. For me, in my next birth, I would like to be an Amur Falcon. I would like to be an eagle flying free, in the skies. So anyways, so this is going to be about the Amur Falcon Conservation Initiative. This would not have been possible without the support of the local communities, no doubt. And there were also a partnership, there were partners in this program from, the Nagaland Forest Department, the ministry provided us with funds, the CMS was backing it up, and then we had Hungarian raptor biologists who were studying the sister species of the Amurs, known as the Red Footed Falcons. They were studying them there, and they had never seen an Amur. So for them, it was a new experience coming to this part of the world. It's building a story for them about their sister species, that's the Amur. And for me, it was about their species, which is the red-footed falcon. So it was a joint thing. Now, the reason behind taking help from the Hungarian raptor biologists was also that. There is a small episode here which I would like to narrate to you. So in 2013, by September, the groundwork had been done, and we were almost ready with a project of tracking a few of these birds that will help conservation work, that will primarily build information that can be used for awareness. So we had to procure these tags. I'm going to tell you about these tags, but these are highly sophisticated, highly specialized tags and are only produced on limited basis. And for purchasing these tags, you need to place order 1 year ahead. So I got the project, or we initiated this project only in 2013, and we're really gearing that we push for this project. And we realized that we cannot get these tags now. Strangely, it's a coincidence of sorts. When good things have to happen, it just simply happens, Subodh. So strangely, we were actually scouting for people who would have experience tagging a small raptor like this. That's when my colleague in this picture here, who was the head of the Raptors MOU, he was trying to scout around for people, and he found that there are these Hungarians who are actually tracking the red-footed falcon, which is the sister species of the Amurs. So he contacted them to ask them, hey, we need expertise, we need help to track the Amurs. Can you guys pitch in? They said, yes, we'll be very much interested. And then when we told them that we don't have tags, do you by chance have any tags? Strangely, that particular year, they were to tag 10 of the red-footed falcons from Hungary. By the time the tags, and they had placed order a year ahead, but by the time the tags arrived for them, the red-footed falcons had already left on their migration. So they were just going to sit with 10 tags, unable to tag the red-footed falcon. They had to wait for 1 whole year. So they immediately loaned 3 of those tags, and they had also agreed to come over to Nagaland to help with trapping these birds. And I did not have any experience catching Amurs and tagging using these equipments. So it was quite a kind of a coincidence, It was full of drama, and conservation work is a lot of drama. Field work is all about drama. So all of these things seem to come in place. And thankfully, as we had promised, that people will not hunt the birds, and we will show you guys that these birds are unique, this particular experiment had to come in. So this project is also about how research, using advanced technology can help conservation. So how each of these things are different. Advanced technology, there's somebody into technological advancement, there's somebody doing research, like most of us, we do research, and then there's someone who's doing conservation. So how we can bring all of these 3 things together and actually make things work for conservation, okay? So this project, this initial phase, it was a pilot phase where we had to tag 3 birds in 2013. It was primarily aimed at supporting conservation efforts to reduce and ultimately eradicate the harvesting of Amur falcons from Northeast India. So the primary focus was on conservation, okay? Conservation awareness. So an offshoot of that is data about migration and about its movements and stuff like that. And of course, one important information was to identify the stopover sites. That was very, very critical. Okay, so as a biologist, when I arrived in here, when I saw these amurs gathering in such large numbers, all that thought was about these several series of questions that was coming in my head. Why is it that, first of all, in 2012, Amur Falcons were hunted in such large numbers? The hunters were always there. Why did they hunt them in 2012? Or were there episodes like this prior to 2012 and that there was no one reporting it? Do the Amur Falcons roost elsewhere in the state or in the region or elsewhere in India? Do they roost in Maharashtra? Now we know that they are passing through Maharashtra, but do they roost in Maharashtra? Do they roost in such numbers? If they are not roosting in such numbers, why are they not roosting there? Why would they start off all the way from Nagaland and go to Africa? Why hunting of falcons only reported during October, November? Why is it that there is no hunting reports happening in other times of the year? Okay, so they could be returning. So we don't know. Then the migration routes of the Amur Falcons. Which is the route that they're taking? Is it through Maharashtra? Is it through Karnataka? Is it through Goa? Is it through Gujarat? So a whole lot of series of questions. And all of these questions can only be answered, especially when you're talking about a species like the Amur, which is a long distance migrant, traveling all the way from the Amur region where the Amur tigers are, all the way from there down to South Africa, across the equator, across it's like covering a major part of the globe. You need to have really sophisticated advanced technology that can be used to track these birds. Okay, so this image here, there's a lot of transmitters that are in production now. Really, we are heading in sophisticated, going to help us understand how our the ecosystem, how each of these species are operating in this planet. Okay, there are a lot of challenges. With nanotechnology coming in, all of these instruments are miniaturized, but still limitations in this. And one of the biggest limits is weight. So for tracking any bird or any animal, any species for that matter, there's a thumb rule, which is the instruments will have to be less than 3% of the body weight. And here for the Amurs, it was a challenge because it's the raptor that weighs about 160 to 180 grams. So very small raptor. The males are weighing about 160 grams. The females are about 180 grams. So this was something of a major challenge. But thankfully, a company in the US known as Microwave Telemetry, they came out with this tag for commercial sale. This is a 5-gram solar tag or solar platform transmitter, which is having a solar panel on it. So very smart technology in the sense that you really do not have to put in a very large battery. The bigger the battery, the more heavier. So you have a small battery and you have a solar panel that will keep charging it. So this is super, super smart technology that has come in. And the other thing is that since these birds are flying across the continent, they need to be tracked from space. And so these are satellite transmitters. There are dedicated satellites moving over the Earth, which actually pick up signals from these transmitters that are programmed to give out signals at a specific point of time. And let me also tell you that these transmitters are very expensive. Each of these units cost about 3.5 lakhs. And for every data that is sent to the satellite, you need to pay for that. For a year of tracking one particular individual, the investment is about 5 lakh rupees. So it's a huge investment. So it was a very nervous exercise for me. You catch a bird, put this transmitter on it, and you let it go. You don't know, maybe tomorrow it just stops to work. So your 5 lakh rupees just goes down into the sea. Okay, it's literally like that. So we can't afford it. So it's a very expensive process, but something that's unavoidable. So we did go in to catch these 3 birds. I told you that when we first saw these Amurs in such large numbers, we were very happy that the Amurs are there. But it also made us worry. Because if we have to catch these birds, we don't want to catch thousands of these birds in a net. And also, let me tell you the situation at that time. So though the people had actually committed not to kill any birds, there were a segment of people or a section of people in the village who were very unhappy that their livelihoods were affected. Okay, so in a scenario like this, how are we going to go into the village, catch the same birds, and say that we are catching these birds for science? So if one of those local guys come and ask you that, is science more important for you or our stomach is more important? We are going hungry and we are not doing anything about it. And here you're saying, no, 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 we'll tell you where these birds are coming from and all. How is it so important for us? Isn't it? It's a very, very sensitive issue. And it was a challenge for us. We had to do something about it. But we took the risk. We took the risk of going in and trying to trap these birds. So when I went in, Hemant Kamdi was there with us, and I told Hemant, given the situation is very sensitive, I don't think we will do this with the help of any local people. We will do it ourselves. So I had my Hungarian colleagues and the person from CMS Raptors MOU from Abu Dhabi. So we were there trying to trap birds. So we identified a spot where we did see a good number of amurs coming in, but not in such large congregations. So we were sure that we would catch some birds. We do not want to kill birds. Just imagine you catch birds and you kill them in your mist net. Okay, so it's almost like you have hunted these birds. So it was a very, very delicate situation. So we set about with an attitude that we can catch them. We put out these tents. It was a 4-day program. It was fixed. The flight tickets, return flight tickets were booked for my foreign colleagues. And we put out these nets, hoping to catch them every evening when the amurs arrived. You won't believe, the first 3 days, day after day, we only caught bats. We didn't catch anything else. And getting these bats out of the net was a very messy affair. They would just get entangled so much. On one occasion, one of my colleagues got bitten by the bat. And it was a medical emergency. Late in the night, in a remote place like in this particular area, we had to send him to a dispensary in the night to get him some first aid done. So it was getting painful, and it was also disappointing that we are not going to succeed this way. And we were worried. First, the promise, we are holding on to this, that we are going to do this exercise. And if we don't catch these birds now, it will be only next year when these birds arrive. All of the investment that has gone into bringing these foreigners here to help me do this tagging or help us do this tagging, everything will go in vain. So we really had to do it, and we were really desperate. And all these while, when we were actually setting up nets and trying to catch these amurs, we could never keep the local hunters away. It is their land. So these guys were sitting and watching us from distance and actually giggling and laughing at us. So I knew these guys are mocking us. They knew that we were never going to be successful catching these birds. Hemant kept coming and asking me, sir, can we involve them? Can we involve? They will catch us the birds. So on the last day, the day before we were going to depart, we actually gave in. We said, okay, let's get these guys to help us. Unbelievable. The kind of knowledge that they have. You know, they're hunters, no doubt. Okay, but without that basic knowledge, you know, you really cannot catch these smart birds. Okay, the nets putting up at about 8 feet from ground. It was like, you know, we could only put up these nets on the ground. The same nets, these guys helped us move it up 20-25 feet up in the air. So basically the same net moved up and became a canopy net. And they knew exactly where the amurs were coming into roost in these trees. So that same evening, after we put up the nets around 4 o'clock, we started seeing the amurs, and we were all rushing to move out of this place, and we were getting out. On the 6th late evening, the first of the amurs, you know, were arriving. Okay, and we were waiting for darkness to set, and moved into the roost site around 7:30, waiting for one of my colleagues to go and check this and come back and tell us whether we have. Came back, there was silence, and he just jumped up in joy to say that we have caught 30. Okay, so it is not just one, it's hundreds or thousands, but 30 birds, fantastic number. We could now be choosers from which bird that we could actually put on the tag. So it was quite an elaborate exercise. And the first of the birds we put a tag was a male, And we had not thought of names for them at that point of time. It was all happening at that particular time. And we decided that since this is a male, let's go with the name Naga. Naga is a masculine name, and let's name it after the state. So Naga. So we gave it the name Naga. The chief wildlife warden had arrived overnight. He traveled all the way from Kohima to come in the night. And the next morning, we tagged this guy and handed it over to him to release, let it go. And he just let it go. So this bird flew away. Naga was out free. He was going to be free forever. And it was now the turn of this bird. And all of these birds, we found them, the three that we had chosen, they were in the best of the body condition. They were in terms of weight. And also the feather condition was perfect. So they will definitely be able to make it. So this particular female, we named her Boca. And I and my colleague from the CMS, Nick Williams, both of us released. And just when we were releasing this bird, it was in my hand, almost telling me that I will come back. Okay, so she left. And then it was the turn of the third bird, Pangti. Pangti, we tagged the bird. We were actually wondering who should release this bird. Now that's when we sensed that, hey, we have named this bird Pangti and we shouldn't be doing the honors of releasing it. It should be actually be released by the people of Pangti. So let's go get the Pangti people. The village was a little high up. So requested Hemant, just go send all the vehicles that are there in the village, just go bring all the people down there. So all of the people came down there, and this is when something really exciting happened. This man is the village headman, and Nick handed over this bird to the village headman to release. And just when he was about to release, this particular man here, he's the pastor of the church. He was associated with Hemant and his team and Zutonglo, the other officer, in creating conservation awareness amongst these communities. He said, no, we should not just release the bird like that. We should actually offer a prayer. We should pray for this bird for its safe return to our village again. And at about 11 o'clock or 11:30 in the afternoon, this man was reciting or was chanting a prayer, and I couldn't believe it. I literally had goosebumps because each of them had at some point of time eaten an Amur Falcon. And here they were wishing well for this bird to come back safely to their village. So that's something that believed that this is happening. So she was released by the headman, and thereafter the actual story about the Amurs began. Okay, so on the 7th of November, the Amurs were released, and after a few days, Naga was the first to depart from Nagaland. Okay, so Naga flew straight from Pangti village, from the Doyang Reservoir, straight for about 1,000 kilometers over Bangladesh and then over the Bay of Bengal. It's interesting. Why would this bird take an oceanic route even here? Why wouldn't it not take a safer route over mainland? Now, after coming down, almost entering into the northern part of Orissa, it takes a turn to the west and flies continuously for one day. Okay, and then from here on, this is somewhere around Satara or maybe northern, just south of Mumbai, around here. It cuts across straight to Somalia. So we were actually thinking that these birds would fly down like this, down here, in this fashion. But whereas this was taking a route to what is now known as what we know this area as the Great Horn of Africa, or the country Somalia, highly disturbed country, politically disturbed country called Somalia. So why? Why is Naga doing this? And this entire journey was 5,600 kilometers. And it did a non-stop flight of about 5 hours, 5 days and 10 hours, non-stop. Why would it stop somewhere in India, take some rest, and then embark on this migration? This oceanic crossing over the Arabian Sea is about 2,500 kilometers. 3 days, day and night, a raptor that cannot land anywhere in water and crossing the middle of the Arabian Sea. So this is something incredible. Okay, so when we shared this with the local people, they couldn't believe their ears. Okay, so they were already part of our conservation movement. They were excited that there were foreigners coming to our land for the first time, and they were taking so much interest. So what is so important about this bird? Just bringing foreigners to these places? just because all of us are in this whole thing. When we told them about this instrument, this is so expensive, they couldn't believe that we are doing so much for these birds. So they could relate to it. But there was one another very important thing that we did, which is slightly different, which is most often when we go do research, the findings, the data is all with us. The information is with us, and we then disseminate it to them, or we just put it up in the form of a report, we publish a paper, and it's forgotten. Now here, we were trying to create awareness. How are you going to reach people? How are you going to keep the people updated every day where the birds are? I could call up and speak to them. I could tell them through some other means. But how about them actually tracking the bird? So that's when we realized that why don't we actually help a few of these kids or teach a few of these kids, a lot of smart kids, a lot of college going kids there in these villages, in 100% literacy rate in Nagaland. And so all using smartphones and laptops and computers, browsing the web. So they could easily where these birds are. So we basically asked my Hungarian colleagues who are part of the European Union to host these tags in their particular website known as satellitetracking.eu. And 3 of our birds, these 3 birds, as part of the first phase, were put onto that free of cost. I didn't have to pay for anything. And all the thing that people had to do was actually go into this website and check where Naga is. So almost on a day-to-day basis, the people there were actually seeing where the birds were moving. They did not have to wait for updates. And so what happened is that they got so much involved, they got so connected to it, not only to where the bird is going, but the thing is to the geography. Where is Somalia? They probably never gave a thought to it. Where is Kenya? Where is Tanzania? Where is South Africa? So all of these lines are indicating or connecting them to the geography. So this is exactly what we were initially wanting people to relate. When we say the birds are coming from very far, what is far? Where is Siberia? Where is Amur? Where is northern China? Isn't it? So it became so, they got so involved into this that they used to call me up and ask me, hey, Naga is returning back, Pankti is returning back. Are you coming? They're going to be here in Nagaland very soon. Are you going to come visit our village? So, that's the kind of involvement that we saw. So this is something that continues on even today. People are tracking birds using this particular website. They get to see where their own birds. So it's more about ownership. It's more about feeling the joy about their bird going to different parts of the world. Okay. So now moving on to the information that we have gathered over years now about these birds. So they do go across the equator. So they are trans-equatorial migrants. And on their return migration, they take a different route. Okay, so it is definitely true that they're making elliptical migration. But what we definitely see is that on the return, they're flying over or making entry into Gujarat and flying over the northern Indian plains of the Gangetic plains and then skirting the Himalayas. Okay, in fact, on one occasion, Naga, when was returning the second year, was almost heading towards Dehradun. And I was tracking this bird and I was seeing that, hey, is it coming to Dehradun? Okay, so it didn't come to Dehradun, but just went not very far. It entered into Uttarakhand, then thereon it went into Nepal. And I thought it's probably going to cross the Himalayas. No, it just skirted the Annapurna mountains in the Himalayas there in Nepal and went back towards the northeast and went across. Okay, now there are a couple of interesting things that came out from this. One, I told you about these stopover sites, but stopover sites across the continents. Okay, we'll come back to the stopover sites in the northeast later. But when you see the stopover sites across the continents, what you notice here is that there is the other major gateway. Okay, so all the Amurs on their southbound migration, when they are entering into Africa, they all enter into Somalia. So it's possible that there is another falcon capital of the world in Somalia. When they are returning again back from Africa, they again come down into Somalia, gang up there in a few places south of Mogadishu, capital of Mogadishu, along the Kenya-Somalia border. They stop there for a while, they wait there. So why are they waiting? What are they waiting for? They spend some few days, okay? So, and from there, they move up along the Arabian Peninsula, and on the return, they're not stopping in the northeast. They're heading straight into Myanmar. So why? Why are they stopping? Why are they not stopping on the return journey? And then we noticed that there is a stopover site possibly here in China-Vietnam border that could possibly host a large number of birds. So there could be another, large falcon gathering happening there. And once they arrive into Somalia, so Naga left on from here, here by about 15, he was here in, okay. And thereafter, the falcon's behavior changes. All the other birds that we have tracked, their behavior changes. They now start to move gradually. They get to see all these beautiful vistas of the Kilimanjaro mountains, the Serengeti Plains, Tsavo East and Tsavo West National Park, and all the way down through many other protected areas, Amboseli and all of these places that we often see, documentaries. And I was actually seeing as these birds were moving through these parks, connecting me with all of these beautiful landscapes. So they arrive in South Africa or Southern Africa to celebrate Christmas. Around 25th of December, they arrive here. So thereon they spend about 3 months till about March or mid-March. And as following mid-March, they start to again move back in a gradual manner, arrive in Somalia. But after they have arrived in Somalia, they now make the non-stop flight again. Okay, so this again gets interesting, right? So when they go down from India and when they go up from India, they do these non-stop flights. So why? Why should this bird do these non-stop flights? Okay, and their breeding grounds we now know is northern China. It's about 500 kilometers northwest of Beijing. Okay, in a complete steppe, sparse vegetated area, few trees there. So these birds go back there to breed. And what we also gathered from here, thankfully, these birds remain active for multiple years, thanks to the solar panel on that tag. So all that investment that we did put in, we got the value for the money, that I would say. It came back. First thing is, the people in Pangti believe that it's because of their prayers that the Amur came back, Pangti came back, Naga came back. So they continue to believe that. It should be appreciated, and I believe that it's their faith that the birds kept coming back. And the other thing is that when they go back to their breeding grounds or in the roosting site in South Africa, they almost go back to that same spot. So they show very high site fidelity, particularly the nesting site. It almost looks like the same tree they're going to go and nest on. Okay. Now, let me also share with you here, Amurs or the Red Footed Falcons, as we know, they don't make their own nest. They actually use the nest of other birds. They use the nest of corvids. Okay, you have a bird known as the jackdaws. Okay, you have there are these magpies that breed in these areas, and there is also this bird known as the rook, which they nest here in these high latitudes. Rooks and jackdaws and magpies. So they finish nesting by the time the Amurs arrive. So the Amurs are actually using the nests abandoned by these birds. So can you imagine, we are talking about 1 million Amur Falcons. Are there more than 1 million jackdaws or corvids or rooks and magpies? So it's all interesting. So we still don't know much about that story, but I'm telling you that these birds go down there. I started off with telling you about how research and advanced technology, when they come together, merge together, it really makes it exciting. But no doubt, it really helps you in this conservation work. And that's exactly what started happening. And it's now a tradition to celebrate the return of the Amurs. And as we speak now, the Amurs are passing through the Northeast. So they're also having a celebration now. And they will have the main celebration when the birds actually arrive in October, November. So here is a cake cutting ceremony. It's a time to gather. Nagaland is about festivals. It's about celebrations, about partying. People are, they have a lot of fun, so they enjoy. So, well, that is that. The other thing is that they kept up their promise, zero hunting. So the same CMS organization, which wrote a letter to the ministry asking India to take action, they wrote a letter to the ministry again, thanking for what we have done. And they also sent in a letter of appreciation to the communities for putting in the effort to protect these birds. If you see it at the end of the day, it's the communities who have actually brought this change. So a simple letter of appreciation, acknowledging their efforts, acknowledging the sacrifices that these people have made, was again played a very important role. In fact, there were so many other villages who had started protecting Amur Falcons and their forests where they used to roost. So those people started looking up to us, saying that even we are protecting, will we not be acknowledged? Will we not get a letter of appreciation? So we did help all of these other villages to get letter of appreciation and things like that. But most importantly, it's about acknowledging their efforts. Okay. So here is one particular letter of appreciation that came in from the Chinese bird watchers. The kids from the Chinese bird watchers actually sent in a letter to the people of Nagaland saying that, thank you people of Nagaland for you from stopping hunting and protecting the Amurs, because of which we are able to see the Amurs. Okay. So what you see here is that the Amurs are connecting landscapes, no doubt. But more importantly, they are connecting people. They're connecting people within Nagaland. Each of these areas are of different tribes. They're connecting them. Everybody is now speaking to each other because of the Amurs. And we are all looking up to Nagaland because of the Amurs. And people far and wide beyond Nagaland, say China, say South Africa, they're all talking about Nagaland. So no doubt this particular species connects landscapes and connects people. Okay, so that has actually also really captured the mind. So these are the other roost sites that you see here, where these Amurs gather in very large numbers, and thankfully all of these people have started protecting these Amurs. And there was a situation where they started asking us, you have gone and tagged birds in Woka or in Pangti, name them after their village. Now we have started protecting these birds. Why don't you come and tag birds from our village and name it after our village? We want our village name also to travel around the world. You know, it's really like that. So yes, it is definitely something, a very important request, and we need to do something. So thankfully for us, this project, just when our project, when Naga and Pangti were nearing their life, or they were still operating, our current minister, Union Minister, Sri Prakash Javadekar, he had come because this word had spread so far and wide that the Amurs are gathering in such large numbers. And he being the forest minister, he wanted to see it. So he ended up here in Nagaland, and I was there with him to show him around the Amurs. So I was there through every bit of emotion that he went through. I was there next to him, listening to it or feeling it almost. He couldn't just believe his eyes that there could be just so many Amur Falcons. He really got excited. He probably called somebody, I think his family, on the phone, and he was telling them that I'm seeing so many birds. How can there be so many birds in one place here? Okay, so it was he was really moved by it. Then he asked me, what should we do? I want to tag a bird. I want to release a bird. Where is the bird? I said, sir, I don't have funds for the project. The project is over. And we do. So he asked me, what can we do? So that's when the thought came that all of these other villages, people are asking that we should go and tag birds in there. So I put this word to him, sir, all of these villages, they're all protecting these birds, and all that they want is that we should tag birds from their villages and name it after that. He loved the idea. So he immediately gave a press release saying that next year we will take up this project. So this was in 2015. The next major phase of work started in 2016. As people kept their promise, and we did keep our promise. Go back to each of these villages, capture birds, tag them name them after their villages. So Longline is part of the 2016 batch of birds, which continues to be active. I will tell you more about these birds. Each of these birds, whether they lasted for long or for some time, they did become part of the history of that community. It's a history of the conservation efforts. Conservation had taken seeds even before this, but it is all part of the history of conservation activities in these areas. So moving on from Nagaland, okay, so 2016, that episode finished, and then we were hearing about similar stories happening in Manipur, as well as in Mizoram, as well as in Meghalaya, that people there again have started protecting these Amurs. And they are also having the same feeling that why don't people come and tag birds from our village and name it after the village. And that's how the Manipur Amur Falcon Conservation Initiative started off. And it started off in this particular place called Tamenglong, mountainous tribe. People are again of the Manipuri Naga tribe. very similar to the people of Nagaland, and very similar landscapes, a lot of hunting again for this particular bird happening in these areas. So we are setting into this place, similar to Hemant working in, along with the other colleagues, Zutonglo working in Nagaland. Here in Manipur, another officer, Arun, who's from Kerala but belongs to Manipur cadre, he, along with a huge number of local, wildlife activists, part of NGOs, all were working together trying to create awareness. So they had also done much of the ground, ensuring that these birds no longer are hunted. So it was again perfect timing to start a tracking program. And so in November 2018, we went over there to tag 2 birds. A program didn't go well. Okay, program didn't go well, but if you look at it it is negative. But there is also a positive with it. If he had just and these birds went away to Somalia, okay, or to Africa, or wherever, the impact of what would have happened would have only been restricted to these mountainous tracts. What actually happened was we named 2 birds there. One bird Tamenglong after the district Tamenglong, another bird we named Manipur after the state Manipur. And Manipur was a male bird. This bird, when we released, instead of going back to that roost site where we caught it, it went to an adjoining district. And we did not know that there was an Amur Falcon roost site there. So this is where I was telling you how we needed to know where exactly are these roost sites, because only then we'll know where else are there threats to these birds. So we did not know at that point of time. And this bird happened to go there. And strangely, coincidence of sorts, I don't know, what can you say, out of all this particular bird was shot down. And the hunter, he actually found this bird and he picked up this bird and he saw that it's carrying something on it. So he actually took it to the local MLA, who was part of the celebrations after we had the Amur Falcon tagging in Manipur. We were happy that we were successful. We were returning back. Just before we were leaving for Imphal, we heard this information from the MLA saying that there's a bird with the tags. So I was thinking that it's one of those birds from Nagaland, which has actually stopped working. But unfortunately, I found that it is Manipur. It was an embarrassment. It was a thorough embarrassment for all of us, for the department, for the administration. How can you just shoot down a Manipuri bird, a bird named Manipur? No. And that particular evening, there was a candlelight march asking for justice for Manipur. And when I said that there are some positive outcomes of this is also that because of this candlelight march, there was a huge media coverage of this. A lot more people became to be known. So today I look at that the life of Manipur, this particular Amur Falcon, didn't just go waste. It actually created a huge amount of awareness that needs to be done. So now you would not believe that this is happening in Manipur, that every year before the Amurs arrive, the guns from each of these villages are withdrawn. All the people having guns in the Amur Falcon villages have to deposit it to the DC's office or to the village council's office. So from September, October, November, December, 4 months. So can you imagine that these 4 months is not only helping protecting Amurs, but there's a whole series of other wild, including smaller birds, which are all protected. So I'm not saying that, this is all rosy and nice and this is all perfectly done. But in a place where these things were never there, gradually and slowly people have started accepting this norm, that this is what we should be doing. So when we are slowly beginning to accept lockdown, so there are also people here accepting that the season of closure. Believe me when I say this, there were cultural practices, traditional practices, banning people from hunting even here. But over time, all of these things were lost. So now we are trying to bring back all of this, and thanks to the Amurs that this is all happening. So all is not lost. So we went back again in 2019. And we went back to that same village, the first village where we had tagged the previous year. And we found that this year the Amurs are not roosting there. They're actually roosting in the village where the Amurs, where Manipur was actually shot down. So for the first time I went into that village, the village headman, and he was very embarrassed. He said, we did not know that you are doing this tagging program. We did not know that, Amurs should not be hunted. So we won over them. And we actually caught birds in that same village. People there again promised that they will stop hunting, and they did not hunt any birds. And we actually involved the local people to help us catch birds, and 5 of these birds were satellite tagged from there, and today they are flying free. As we speak, 2 of these birds, Irang and Barak, there are these 2 birds. They are actually flying over the Arabian Sea, along the Arabian Peninsula, and this particular one has actually gone past the northeast. So it has given us an incredible amount of information, fantastic stories. There are so many stories that I'm unable to share here, but all of these stories, all of these birds has actually helped us create more and more awareness. Okay, so why do these birds go down south in this particular fashion? Okay, so in mid-October, it is all of these flight passages are all associated with the monsoon system in India. So it's the monsoon that governs when these birds fly across India. So when these birds arrive in mid-October, mid-November, that is when our southwest monsoon, which had dissipated in the northeast, builds up again as the northeast monsoon. This northeast monsoon starts to move down to peninsular India. My native state, Tamil Nadu, that's where they get rain. Predominantly, most of those dry, arid areas get rain from the northeast monsoon. So these Amurs are actually taking benefit of these northeast monsoon winds which are returning. If you look at it, you see these green lines down there over the Bay of Bengal, that's the orientation, it is going down. So they're taking benefit. So it's a very smart bird in the sense that if it is covering 5,600 kilometers in 5 days and 10 hours, it's at a speed of 45 kilometers per hour. And if there is a tailwind of about 20-25 kilometers per hour, it's actually putting in an effort of 20 kilometers per hour. So really super smart bird, taking benefit of these winds and gliding across with these winds, and they know exactly where they will land up when they follow these winds. That is the Great Horn of Africa. Okay, so these winds, when they go over the Arabian Sea during October, November, that is the time when these winds again build up. It becomes the easterly trade winds or easterly winds which go into Africa, and this is actually the monsoon rain for Africa. Okay, the Amurs are using these winds to fly across, and the other thing is they are chasing the monsoon. Okay, so when monsoon arrives there in Africa, there is a lot more food that is being produced, a lot more insects start to emerge, and these birds are foraging on them. Okay, so it's also flying with the winds, chasing the monsoon. Now what happens on the return? We know that the monsoon wind is another 1 month away from now. 4th of June, the monsoon will arrive in southern coast of Kerala, but they cannot wait that long, because if they're going to wait that long, they will be late in their breeding grounds. So they have to arrive in their breeding grounds in the first week of June, and in another 2.5 months, they should finish breeding and start to return by September, they should start to return again to come back into Nagaland. Cannot wait till June. There is a pattern in their flight. And again, if you overlay it with the winds, these are westerly winds that are coming in. These are generally hot winds that we feel at the surface, but high up at the heights that they're flying, definitely cool. And these are the hot winds which are bringing summer. I mean, hot winds that I witnessed during the summer here in the northern Indian plains. So using these winds to return back. So just when we were thinking that this is the norm, this is what the birds do, this is how they go, I was like an Amur Falcon whisperer, I would say, I couldn't predict where these birds will go from here to here. I could predict. Thanks to the Amurs, it's not something like I have an innate knowledge or something like that. It's just seeing these patterns. Just when I thought, this is what they will do, Longlang had a surprise for me. Longlang is the bird that was tagged in 2016 and from this remote village called Yongim Chen in Longlang district in Nagaland. So she came back to Somalia on the first year and then started flying towards Gujarat, and I started informing my friends there it's going to cross across Bhuj or cut across Ahmedabad, so look out for the bird, casually telling them. It took a detour towards Porbandar. It skirted the Gujarat Saurashtra coastline, went straight towards Mumbai. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was wondering what on earth is it doing? Why is it going to Mumbai? It flew over Mumbai. Okay, many of you Mumbaikars wouldn't have seen it because this during the night. And from there, I thought it's going to go across into Odisha. But then it had a bigger surprise for me. It went down to Tamil Nadu, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka border. Okay, some of these famous protected areas there. The first year it went down to Kolar Goldfields. Okay, so this bird now it's active on the 4th year. And across all of these 4 years, it goes down to southern India on its return journey. This is one of those individuals that does that. I'm sure there are many other individuals that we are not tracking, obviously, which are also going down. So there must be some populations going down to southern India and going back. And it's a female. It is not in a hurry to go back and hold territory, possibly. So the males will probably rush in quickly and hold the territory, hold a particular nest, and then the females arrive, pair up, and then nest. So she seems to be not in a hurry. And as I speak now, she's just left southern India this year, and she's almost en route to Sundarbans of Bangladesh and heading towards the northeast. Okay, and so Amurs are always exciting. They have a lot more stories to tell us, and yes, so it is going to be some more time before we know. So Longlang saga has been unimaginable. If I recollect properly, she was the last of the birds that we were releasing in one of these villages. And when I released her, these birds, when you release them, and when you release the Amurs from your hand, naturally out of stress, they would immediately scoot. They would just fly off into the sky. That's a very good sign that this bird is fit. This bird flew up into a tree close by, and it sat on the branch there, looking down at us. We have a picture of that. I'm not put it here. It actually caused a bit of a worry for me. We actually had the feeling that maybe she's not going to do well, but she proved us wrong again because she continues to be active. It's for a record period of time of 3 years and 6 months now, and she has logged nearly 9,800 locations. Okay, which is like a data set, which is a dream for any biologist or for just anybody to use this data to know about these birds. Has given us some important insights, critical insights into what these birds do. So this is the current standing of 4 of the birds that we had tagged this last year. And Longlang is, of course, from 2016. You can see 2 of these birds. They are flying over the Arabian Sea. And who knows, they may possibly fly over Mumbai. And so before I almost conclude the slide, this is the kind of visuals that you get to see in Nagaland now. People are looking at these Amurs in a very, very different perspective. They're actually waiting, and this picture rightly captures it, that excitement. They're possibly looking for Pangti, they're looking for Naga. These birds will never go out of their minds. They're always etched in their minds. So when I narrate this story, people often ask me, okay, they still cannot believe it. So they ask me, how could this happen? How is it possible that in 1 year that there was so much hunting and in the next year there was no hunting at all? I mean, zero hunting, that's not possible. It's not possible at all, okay? So there were administrative orders banning, which definitely had a hold, okay? There were communities who were threatened that all the village development funds will be frozen if they don't stop hunting. So that did help campaign. Okay, media has a very important role to play. So the outcry, the media coverage, subsequently the positive stories that the media covered, it spread the word around that these people have started protecting. It actually encouraged more people to start protecting. It brought the information saying that these people have received a letter of appreciation. So more people started thinking that we should protect, so we will be acknowledged for our efforts. Okay, so the church played a very pivotal role in creating this awareness. So the pastors who were helping us with all of this work really helped. Community ownership, it's about community governance. So back into play, WIS conservation project, the initiative where we satellite track birds. So we could connect these communities across these geographies. Familiar with where these birds are from, no doubt help them. But all of these things simply did not bring about this change. There's still something else. And that I call the Naga pride. The pride with which people were, looking at this, the pride that they had in them to say that, if we are hunters, we can also be protectors. We will show the world that we can protect the wildlife. So true to their words, till today, it is happening. It is happening. There is still some amount of hunting happening here and there. Okay, it will take time. You can't expect change overnight to happen. And still, when you see something like this is something still unimaginable. And I strongly believe it's the pride. So whenever we are working with communities, whenever we are working with on conservation issues and challenges, we need to evoke this pride in them. We need to make them feel that ownership of whatever the sacrifices. So, we need to acknowledge them for their loss. So that is something. I'm not saying that not compensate them monetarily, not compensate stuff, they should not benefits, or we should immediately find alternative livelihoods. In the case of the Amurs, finding alternate livelihoods is not easy. It's not that immediately tourism will come and things will all be fair and nice. No, it is not like that. Tourists come, they will go to the easiest of places where they would go. For them, the purpose is to only see Amurs in large numbers. Why would they go into some really remote places? So if you're looking at tourism as the sole, alternate livelihood, it's not possible. And it is not that it's only in these villages that the Amurs will arrive. From our research, from my research, we know now that the Amurs could just move. They do shift their roost sites. So today they are there in Panti. Tomorrow they could completely shift out from that roost site to some other site altogether. So when I keep looking back at this image of the Amurs congregating in such large numbers, one thing comes to my mind is that this is nothing but the reincarnation of the passenger pigeons. The passenger pigeons probably flew around in something like this congregation. So I don't believe in reincarnations and all that, but I cannot explain this. It's almost something like that. It's like a reincarnation of the passenger pigeons in the form of the Amur Falcons that you come here. So these are my colleagues from who are really in helping me in Nagaland. So for all the stories that I've narrated, each and every one of them here, and also there are so many other people in the backdrop, and not have those pictures to put together to show each of their efforts have really, really helped bring this change. So this project, it also about partnership, about work, about working together with the communities and the communities taking pride in this. And before I end, I'll tell you one last story. I've told you many stories. Sorry for that, Subodh. One last story. Just when the Amur Falcon story was happening, there's a newspaper there in Nagaland known as the Morung Express. Okay, there's a cartoonist there by name Sandamo Nguili. Okay, he had captured what was going on in Nagaland very nicely in this cartoon. He's a very nice cartoonist. So what I have portrayed here is that his cartoon, there is a picture of the Blight's Tragopan. Blight's Tragopan is the state bird of Nagaland. Okay, so what the cartoon talks about is, I'm going to read it for you. You arrested this boy for hunting birds. So the cop is telling the forest guard. The forest guard has taken the hunter to the cop to arrest him. So the cop is saying, you arrested this boy for hunting birds. Well, you idiot, this bird is not Amur Falcon. This is Tragopan. Let the boy go. So what I'm trying to tell you that people have literally forgotten about the Blight's Tragopan, which is the state bird. And they are so much aware about the Amur Falcons. Okay, so that is the scale of awareness that this has created. But I would also like to end that many of the villages, people have actually started setting aside small pieces of their community land, which are still having good forest, where the Amurs roost. They are fully aware that these areas, Amurs will roost only for 2 weeks. So just naming it as an Amur Falcon conservation area or something like that doesn't make sense. I mean, they're not really thinking about whether the government wants to recognize it as a community reserve or not. They're not really thinking about it. But their perception or their thought is that whether government recognizes it or not doesn't matter. It's our land. So we want biodiversity to come back. So it is again another very interesting transition from the focus of just Amur Falcons to protecting all the other species in these landscape. And what better can you ask that that this can be done? In fact, last year when I was in Manipur, the the local authorities there were very keen that they want to bring back these areas for hornbills. They want to do something about hornbill conservation. So I know that there is a lot of excitement now in Nagaland that they would like to do something more about the Blystogopan conservation. So conservation is now being spoken widely in a landscape where this was not the case. So there are, of course, there are many other sites within Nagaland which not many people know, but definitely a lot of bird watchers know that they have been having a history of protection of some of those forests for the last 2 decades, 3 decades now. But there is still a huge swath of land in Nagaland where there are very unique biodiversity that needs to be protected. So thankfully, this has really helped us a lot. I was actually thinking that I should show you one more of these things. I'm not going to talk about it much, but there's a very interesting project going on in Beijing. And this is being carried out by BirdLife International and the Chinese Society and many other organizations involved, like the Bird Trust for Honest. So they have been tracking this bird known as the Eurasian cuckoo or the common cuckoo. The common cuckoos are arriving into India now to breed. Okay, so we did not know where they are going. So the common cuckoo, like the Amurs, are again long-distance migrants. So when the Amur Falcon project was started in 2013, in 2014, they had again started off this common cuckoo project there. And very, very interestingly, these birds do arrive through the eastern part of India, cut across India, and go down into Africa. So there are a lot more similarities with what the Amurs do, but the cuckoos do it slightly different. And I will not have much time to tell you about that, but this is again a very interesting story, and how it also tells us that birds are amazing. They have so many stories to tell us. It's just that we need to go about looking for them and studying them. So this is my last slide. Thank you for listening, Subodh and Seema. And I definitely, like I told you earlier, there are so many people behind these efforts. The people of Nagaland and Manipur, particularly the officers from Nagaland and Manipur, and the ministry for funding these projects. So they stepped in at the real time, the time it was really, really needed. So, and yes, everybody now owns it. Everybody takes credit for it. In fact, in the middle of the Amur Falcon Conservation Initiative, India became a signatory to an understanding, to an MOU, which is known as the Raptors MOU. So we became a signatory to the Raptors MOU, which is like, further stating that we will protect all the raptors. Okay, so no doubt we are signatory to the CMS, but under the CMS, there are different groups. So the Raptors is a memorandum of understanding. And in 2016, we became a signatory to that, or we signed that. So yes, so this project definitely has captured or has achieved whatever the objectives that was originally set out for, and it has actually scaled it up to even greater heights. Our understanding of these birds, about their movements, and particularly the time of arrival, and what do they feed on, what do they forage on, it's all getting really, really, really exciting. So Amurs are really providing very important ecosystem services. They're keeping check of insects. They're insectivorous birds. Of course, when they go down to their breeding grounds in China, northern China, they would be definitely switching to something else. So maybe possibly rodents, which primarily occur there. But when they are in Nagaland, we have insights now that they feed extensively on termites. So it's unbelievable stories about these birds. And it has also created a lot of awareness across India in the other state forest departments, trying to initiate similar projects or taking up activities following the Nagaland model. So this is something really, really exciting. So with that, I'll end my talk. Much for giving me time, and thanks to all the audience who are listening to this or who are going to listen to this presentation. And like I told you right at the start, there are good stories happening in this beautiful country of ours. It's culturally very, very diverse, and we need to appreciate that things take time. It's quite depressing, quite frustrating. Even as a researcher, I've I find it very difficult, that unable to accept that there are certain things that's not happening. But it's always a struggle. It's always a struggle. And I'm sure if we continue to pursue this, I'm sure things are possible. And yeah, so with that, please go ahead, tell this wonderful story of the Amur Falcons Conservation Initiative to all of those people that you know. Because what we need is that we need people to hear good stories. So that definitely brings in a lot more positivity. So thank you very much for listening.